Hello and welcome to our June Patch Tuesday webinar. Today, we have our industry expert, Rob Brown, here to give us an inside look into the newest Patch Tuesday release. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat and Rob will reach out after.
Thanks so much, Johanna, and welcome everybody to the June webcast. It's halfway through the year. It's going by so quickly, and I know that everyone is very busy. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to be covering vulnerabilities that you should be prioritizing, using some of the best practices that we've been building over the last decade that has allowed us to deploy over 100 million patches to our managed services customers worldwide. But to start with, we're going to cover some news, some very important news, and I'm going to talk about the feature update end of life first. So this month is the last month you will be able to deploy updates for Windows 10 21H2. It has now gone end of life. In reality, your devices can be patched up until this month, but going forward, there will be no new updates. And as we've seen during COVID, where Microsoft did extend the life of the feature update beyond certain dates, that is not going to happen this time. If you have devices that are still using 21H2, maybe you don't have a strategy to upgrade your systems to 22H2, please reach out to us. There's a couple of very easy ways of doing it. With Syxsense, we can actually upgrade it directly via the ISO file. So you download from Microsoft your ISO file, or in fact, we can use PowerShell. But it's vitally important that this month you upgrade what you can to 22H2. Now, when you get to 22H2, this will be you set for Windows 10. So Windows 10 is end of life, I think 2025. It's just around the corner. But they do not intend to release another feature update for Windows 10. The only exception you have is if you're using long-term service branch. So long-term service branch is a specific fully supported version of Windows 10 that doesn't have to be on a specific feature update, and it still can receive updates. But those are special agreements, special licenses for the operating system in that scenario. So please, once again, plan to upgrade your devices to 22H2. It's very reliable, and our teams are recommending that. Microsoft would recommend going to Windows 11 for their enterprise customers. We also had a couple of days ago a Chromium update. Now, Google Chrome 1.1.4 for both Windows and Mac OS was updated a couple of days back. In fact, it was last Friday. To resolve 5 security fixes. What makes this very serious is that although this wasn't weaponized at the time, successful exploitation of the vulnerability may allow an attacker to compromise a vulnerable system. And that's one of the worst case scenarios of that Google Chrome vulnerability. Because it's Chromium based, we actually do have Mozilla. Mozilla uses the same engine. And again, last week, CISA did put out a statement encouraging anyone using Mozilla Firefox 1.1.4, to upgrade to 1.1.4 and ESR 102.12 for the same reasons. So an attacker could exploit those vulnerabilities to take control of the system. If you are using Microsoft Edge, that also has a similar Chromium update. So any of those 3 browsers, please make sure that they are being upgraded. For the Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox, there is actually a unique upgrade available for them, and that is that your browser can remain fully open when the update is applied in the background. This is actually quite useful, especially for Syxsense customers, because you can actually apply the update without the need to close the actual browser itself. It will be patched at the binary level therefore resolving the issue and not allowing a vulnerability to be exploited. The browser itself is running in memory in something called a sandbox, so it's not something that can actually be attacked as easily anyway. And as soon as the user closes the browser and relaunches the browser, immediately the new update is alive. It's alive on the machine. So the user can be patched in the background. They close the browser, they relaunch the browser, and for both Mozilla and for Chrome, those browsers will be updated. Now, yesterday we had a larger set of patches released to resolve many vulnerabilities. In fact, if we go back to last month, we didn't have very many at all. In fact, we've had twice as many this month as we had last month. And the reason for that was that Microsoft did not release any .NET framework updates. And they have made up for it this month. So there is an awful lot of .NET framework updates covering all of the different versions of .NET framework. In total, there were 69 new fixes. 6 were critical and 60 were important. There was a medium and there was a low as well. And we'll talk more about those in a second because they don't always match up to the industry recognized CVSS. Of the 69, 8 are more likely to be weaponized. Very important that you take the vendor's recommendation. If it's more likely to be weaponized, it should potentially be a priority for you. However, so far, through both Microsoft and our partners, nothing has been weaponized or made public aware at this point. We do, however, have 2 jump points. I'm going to talk more about jump point in a moment, but in the CVSS severity, they use a scope reference, which is if it's changed, it means you can effectively jump out of the technology of the exploited bug and actually jump out of it and into another technology on the same device. In that example, it's like jumping out of a Hyper-V guest into the host or vice versa. So you can actually jump out of one technology and move sideways or move within the OS. Jump points are very serious. We've seen exploits in the past with SolarWinds, for example, where they were able to use one vulnerability, jump inside, jump side to side, and therefore leave some breadcrumbs in order to get back in again. Very important that you cover off those jump points. Now, the types of bugs that we had fixed today, again, we've had, I think this is for the 6th month in a row, remote code execution vulnerability is coming up on top. There's 26 of those. That's a class of cyber attack in which attackers remotely execute commands to place malware or other malicious code on your computer or your network. Extremely serious, followed by elevation of privilege vulnerability, which is a threat actor who gains access to an employee's account, bypasses the proper authorization channel and successfully grants themselves access to data they're not supposed to have. Denial of service is an attack meant to shut down a machine or a network, making it inaccessible. You just want to cause carnage. Spoofing is the act of disguising a communication or identity to impersonate. Information disclosure, revealing sensitive information such as memory leaks or reading CPU data feeds. And then lastly, a security feature bypass. It's when an attacker bypasses all the authentication mechanisms of a device to gain unauthorized access. By far the most serious is remote code execution. It's very interesting that that again, for the 6th month in a row, it happens to be the majority of the fixes. We do actually list everything out on our website, which we'll go to in a second, so you can see all of the different vulnerabilities that meet those types of bugs. Now, of course, how are we going to prioritize is essential, especially in a highly distributed network. You might have an industry where you highly distributed or potentially lots of machines in offices around the world. It's important to know that there are other options for selecting the right patches than just deploying everything. In fact, it's quite a phenomenon that we hear where the deployment of everything is used in order to remove all risk. However, certain networks and VPN tools aren't able to handle the load, and therefore maybe a slightly more unique selection process could be used, and in phased deployments you can roll out patches that are meeting certain risks. So this is how we are going to recommend the prioritization of your patches. And we start off with the vendor severity. Of course, the vendor severity is a source of truth. Comes from Microsoft or from Adobe or from Google. Typically is from critical, high, important, medium, low, and NA. Obviously, the more critical, the more severe you may want to react. The more severe you may want to deploy those patches. But we combine that with the CVSS score, which is an independent score of the vulnerability. It takes more into real world scenarios, how difficult the vulnerability is to exploit. Does it require internet access, etc.? Physical access. Does it require the end user to click something? And this can change the severity in a way that more reflects the risk. Now, if you put the two together, you have a rather transparent way of organizing severity based on those two scores. CVSS score is from 10 to 0, 10 being the very worst, 0 being the very least. Put them together and you have a better way of organizing the severity. Then you've got the state of the vulnerability. So not every patch that's released is trying to fix something that is weaponized. Sometimes it is. In this patch Tuesday, nothing was weaponized at this time on Wednesday. Weaponized means there's active exploits, either detected by Microsoft Security Threat Intelligence or via their partners. The antivirus organizations around the world do work really well together to share when viruses or ransomware is spreading, whether it was using a particular vulnerability that was fixed with one of these patches. If something is weaponized, it does not mean the severity is critical or high. And sometimes a weaponized vulnerability doesn't change the severity at all. Because of that, we add it into our selection process. Public aware does not mean weaponized. It means the exact way to exploit has been published on the internet. It does not, however, mean that it's easy to exploit. It just is a way to exploit. I certainly wouldn't want to be an IT security manager that knew something was public aware, but I didn't deploy it because it was really difficult to do so. That has been caught out before. So again, we add that to our data points. More data points we have better intelligence. And we can make a better priority on the patches that we're deploying. To balance this, we have a countermeasure. Now, a countermeasure exists in one of two types. We have a mitigation or we have a workaround. So potentially, this particular vulnerability affects an operating system, but only in a certain condition where it's something is enabled. You may have a sophisticated antivirus that actually mitigates the need completely to deploy the patch. Or there could be a workaround where you apply a registry key or stop a service, as we've seen with Print Nightmare in the past. Stopping the service completely mitigated the vulnerability. All countermeasures are documented as well inside of Syxsense and inside this webinar today. There are actually a few that do have countermeasures, and those countermeasures may be easier to deploy than a 1.5 gigabyte patch. Please be aware, read the details from the vendor. If the vendor recommends you remove the mitigation or the workaround after applying the update, please follow their advice. Lastly, it all comes down to your exposure. If you have a really severe vulnerability with a really high CVSS score that's weaponized on just 2 machines in your environment, but you have a lower severity vulnerability that is weaponized on the majority of your environment, you should use your exposure in that calculation. If you're not a Syxsense customer, it's okay. We're going to put everything on the website. Take the CVE reference from the site, pop it into your tool set, calculate which ones you have the most missing, and go ahead and deploy those updates to your environment. Now, to do that, we're going to jump across to Syxsense. So we actually do publish everything on Patch Tuesday. So we've had actually this uploaded since yesterday. If you go across to syxsense.com on our homepage, you can read all about what we are doing at Syxsense from a technology perspective. We're looking forward to artificial intelligence and security and vulnerability remediations. We have a resources section at the top, which allows you to access our resource center. We do put out a lot of articles around vulnerabilities, such as the Microsoft and the Google Chrome and the other third parties, which are really important. We do a lot of webinars throughout the month, helping our customers and anyone watching to protect their environment. We also do delve quite deeply into other really interesting topics like zero trust, which we think is really important if you want to secure your environment fully. On the resources page, we also have, like I said, that resource center where we cover off patch management and our Patch Tuesday. And here we have all of our Patch Tuesday writings. If you don't remember to come to the site every single month, go to the chat, use the function down here and ask to be added to the list, and we'll send you an email every time we put one of these on the website. As I said yesterday, we had 69 fixes. We're going to go into some details. I've got some recommendations and actually an Easter egg. My team was actually doing a lot of research behind the scenes before this Patch Tuesday webinar was sort of published last night. And we've got some new details that we're going to bring to you. But we did have 69 fixes. 6 were rated critical and 4 have a seriousness rating of 9.8. Which is actually the first time this year we've had so many CVSSs rated that high in one Patch Tuesday release. Now we had in addition to that, we had 2 moderate and a single low severity fix that covered everything from Microsoft Windows, components, Office, Exchange, Microsoft Edge I mentioned, SharePoint, .NET, and Visual Studio, Teams, and the remote desktop client. Now, just because of the analytics side of things, I like to count all of the CVSS scores up to give me an indication of how serious this particular Patch Tuesday was from previous Patch Tuesdays. And as I suspected, we've actually doubled the CVSS score over last month, so we're up to 500. Total CVSSs from 275 last month. That's simply because we doubled the number of patches. But actually what that means is the majority of the patches that were in this release have a higher CVSS rating, which I thought was really interesting. Now, my first one to recommend today is Microsoft SharePoint. CVE 2023-29357. Now, an attacker that gained access to a spoofed JWT authentication token can use them to execute a network attack which bypasses authentication and allows them to gain access to the privileges of an authenticated user. This is more likely to be exploited, recommended by Microsoft. However, SharePoint is a unique operating system, a unique application that requires you to ensure you have backups before you start. The upgrade of SharePoint is quite complex and needs to be planned, and that's why we don't actually recommend that you add the SharePoint update into a routine deployment. So we recommend that that be done separately. The CVSS is 9.8. It is not weaponized. It does have a countermeasure, and that's a specific version of SharePoint, which we're going to cover in a second, needs to be installed. It can be attacked over any network, including the internet, with low attack complexity and no privileges or no user interaction. My second recommendation is CVE 29363. Now, this is, we actually know this one because it has happened last Patch Tuesday. It's the Windows Pragmatic General Multicast, known as PGM, Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. I did some more research on this one because it's quite unique. We have had it for the last couple of months now, but we haven't really seen it since. Now, the Pragmatic General Multicast PGM is a reliable multicast computer network transport protocol. PDM provides a reliable sequence of packets to multiple recipients simultaneously, making it suitable for applications like multi-file transfer, multi-receiver and file transfer. Now, this does require the Microsoft Message queuing, MSMQ 3.0 installed. So if you do have a Windows Server without that installed, you'll actually you have a countermeasure. You don't have to apply this update. But if you do have it, you do need to make sure you prioritize that urgently. My next one is CVE 2023-32009. This is the Windows Collaborative Translation Framework Elevation of Privilege Vulnerability. An attacker who successfully exploited this could gain system privileges. Now, this is one that has a jump point. So if exploited, in this case, an attack could be performed from a low privilege app container. The attacker could elevate their privilege and execute code or access resources at a higher integrity level than that of the app container execution environment, effectively jumping out of it. It does have a CVSS score of 8.8. Currently is not yet weaponized, which is really good. To put this into context, the Windows Collaborative Translation Framework is an extension of the Microsoft Translator API that allows post-publishing improvements of translated text. Now, I'm sure everyone is familiar with ChatGPT and other AI technology integrated into Bing. This is where it's going. So if you have any of those technologies or use any of those technologies, please make sure that you do keep this up to date. It's very important. Now, its risk is slightly less. It does require local access to the device on the local LAN. So it can't be accessed over the internet, which is good, but it does have low attack complexity, low privileges, no user interaction at all. Now, the last one I want to mention, I mentioned an Easter egg because my team had mentioned that there's a Microsoft Exchange vulnerability in here as well. That Microsoft Exchange vulnerability is a remote code execution vulnerability. The specific flaw exists within the command class. The issue results from the lack of proper validation of user-supplied data, which can result in the deserialization of untrusted data. While this does require an attacker to have an account on the Exchange server, successful exploitation could lead to executing code with system privileges. And they've also told me that within the last 6 months, a vulnerability just like this has in fact been weaponized in the past. Lastly, please make sure that you review this list. Anything in this list which you detect in your environment as being highly detected, please make sure that is included in your process. Of course, if you're still using remote desktop client, I know this one is here. I didn't choose it. It says exploitation less likely, but the other one I thought would be more important to reference. If you would like to take a look at Syxsense, see how the tool can help you detect and patch your vulnerabilities, feel free to schedule a demo with our team. If you have any technical questions, such as you need advice on a patching strategy, maybe you've got a strategy you would like to run it by us, we'd love to help. It could be just advice on testing, how testing of updates has changed over the last several years. In fact, how advancements in testing process is able to help detect vulnerabilities, issues caused by patches in your environment before they start getting rolled out to your live environment. And of course, if you would like any assistance with that, please use the chat function in the bottom right-hand corner. This is on the Syxsense website. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you do have any questions, we will reach out privately to you. And again, we hope this has been really useful. Until next time, I wish you happy patching. Thank you.